Part 3, Clearing Emotional Pain. Welcome to the transformative journey of Lesson 7, Part 3. In this segment, we dive into the innovative practices designed to navigate the intrinsic landscape of your inner world. Our goal is not to just understand, but to actively cleanse emotional pain, while fostering a mindset and perception that promotes healing. Understanding your inner world. Understanding your inner world during emotional releases of pain involves diving into your thoughts, emotions, and overall mental state as you navigate the process of letting go and healing. And to do this, we'll go ahead and do something like the journey of self-discovery. Begin by diving into self-discovery through practices like journaling, meditation, and introspection that uncovers the layers of your inner world to gain insight into subconscious patterns. And also using awareness as a foundation, as awareness is the key to transformation. Identify recurring thoughts, beliefs, or behaviors that contribute to emotional pain. Acknowledge them as the first step towards healing. So to better understand what's going on within ourselves and to make the unconscious conscious, there is a process that we have to take the time and the effort in doing, which is trying to understand ourselves and the why behind our choices, our being, our thoughts, and our emotional states that seem to be more of a pattern in our life. And once we pick up on the patterns and its frequencies and how often they occur and what triggers them to become a pattern in us, it becomes a lot easier for us to do the work in the in-depth core fundamental transformation so that we can learn how to navigate and properly align ourselves with the future or the goals that we envision ourselves in. And because we are diving deep within our core into the roots of the why behind our being, we have to connect on a deeper level, right? Which brings us into ways of connecting on a deeper level by cultivating mindful awareness. So here we want to cultivate mindful awareness through practices like meditation, for example, that allows us to analyze and perceive and observe our thoughts and emotions as they unfold without any form of judgment or criticism. And this, what it does is it creates a space for us to understand and accept that what they are, because we're not here to criticize them or judge them. We're just here to observe and become aware of what in fact they are and what brings them to be. So that in our next step, for example, of embracing vulnerability, we use vulnerability as a strength. As we share our struggles with trusted individuals, it allows us to recognize more of what's going on within as we use the assistance of a therapist or a trusted friend or individual that we can be open and vulnerable with. So that by recognizing this openness fosters a deeper connection with us and the individual and also within ourselves, but also accelerates the healing process. Perception shift for emotional cleansing. So I always say perception is everything, because perception is the reason why we perceive our reality the way we choose to perceive it. And how one person sees one thing is not how the other sees it, because it's going to be based on the level of consciousness that we are operating on, the level of healing that we've done on ourselves, the amount of work that we've done on ourselves, the growth and evolution that has gained us the maturity to hold such wisdom. It's all going to contribute to how we perceive our experience. And because of this, when we are doing such work, we need to make sure that there are certain elements that we do in this fundamental stage that we make it into a habit. These small micro habits allows us to get used to what is necessary for us to always be in the energy of awareness, so that in that awareness we are always aware and observant of what is happening in our inner world. And the first step, or one of the techniques used to shift our perception so that we can emotionally release and cleanse ourselves, is by detaching from the identity labels, right? Detach from identity labels associated with emotional pain. Understand that pain is part of the human experience but doesn't define your essence. Create a space for growth beyond these levels. So, as I was saying in previous lessons, what we see in our world really is neutral. What gives it the definition and the meaning behind how we choose to perceive it and experience it is us and our subjective experience of it. So when we learn to remove these labels and these meanings, things that don't really benefit us and put us in this emotional distress and trigger and so on, bringing us back into the experience that we'd rather not have, we need to reflect on that very emotional state and identify what is the meaning and the label that we are giving it, so that by first becoming aware of what is the meaning and label that we ourselves are providing it within our perception of it, we learn to detach from that meaning. As our fundamental goal at this stage would actually be to reframe it so that we can fully neutralize that labeling or that emotional state that causes this emotional pain within us. But before we can fully neutralize it into the balance of the polarization of that emotional state, we first need to understand it and know the why behind the origin of that emotional pain, so that by getting into the root cause of it, down to the core of our emotional state, we are better suited, in a better position to reframe that. Which brings us into the next one: challenge negative thoughts. Actively challenge and reframe negative thoughts. Shift your mindset from self-judgment to an acknowledgement of growth, creating a fertile ground for positive change. So what this is going to do is going to allow you to not necessarily continue the route or the cycle of believing your subconscious repetitive cycle and patterns and programming. Now you're taking the position to face it and challenge these thoughts and these beliefs and these emotional states that have been running in your subconscious mind on kind of like autopilot. So in order for you to reprogram yourself or reframe your thoughts and your behaviors and so on, you need to go with it head on by challenging it. Is this really how I feel about it, or has this feeling or belief been passed down to me? Is this something that is 100% a fact, or can I find evidence that prove it otherwise, right? Is this something that my ego needs to feel that I'm right so that I feel safe and secure? Or is it something that if I look at from another point of view, from a higher perspective, it's going to have a variety of perspective that are going to justify the emotional state not being as severe as I perceived it to be? Because remember, a lot of these emotional states that come from emotional pain can be things that even occurred to us as children. And when we are children, we don't necessarily know how to process our emotions or how to properly perceive it, where it's not a threat to our safety, or it's not a moment that we feel neglected or abused, because we are just going with the innate instinct of feeling uncomfortable or unheard or unseen, right? And those little slight moments that we may have had as children can later on, with the repetitive thoughts and the beliefs that we have maybe developed in our developmental stages, it just gets bigger and bigger because we continue to add more to that emotional state, that emotional pain within our body. And the body keeps scores. One of the books I've read that kind of correlates with this concept. Sometimes we are storing emotions within our body that we are completely unaware of until we are triggered or experience something that resurfaces these emotions to come up again, so that in that opportunity of that experience, we can properly process and release it. But it is not until we are consciously aware of them and in the intention of actually doing that work of releasing, where we can actually do it. Now, if you're not ready to do it, if you're not aware of what exactly is happening, and you're living through the belief system that, oh my God, this always happens to me, I always go through this, because your belief system is still running without being challenged, you're going to continue experiencing these necessary emotions and triggers and experiences so that they resurface and you can release them. But if you don't do the work properly and process these emotional states, you're just going to continue suppressing them and making them bigger and bigger and bigger. And with time of doing this, your energy gets denser because you're holding so much emotional baggage within your mind, within your body, right? And if we don't do the proper releasing of this, then we are anchoring ourselves in these emotional pains that we don't even want to experience. But a lot of us, unfortunately, were never educated on how to learn how to process and release of these emotions and these energies within us, which is why I'm doing the course talking about how we can do it and master it so that we don't have to store it within our bodies for years and years to come, where it's something that if it's happening in this now moment, I am consciously aware of what's occurring as I am observing my experience and allowing myself to process it as it occurs, or even within the day or even within the week of it occurring, so that I am not storing more emotional baggage within me. So by lightening my load of my energies and only holding on to the energies that I would prefer to experience, I align myself better with the possibility or the experience that I would rather have and prefer. And when it comes to experiencing life in the way that we envision it for ourselves, without all of this emotional pain that has been weighing us back for maybe most of our life, for some, right? It is crucial that we learn how to shift our perception of the why behind life, right? Because when we start to reflect back on the foundation of this course altogether, and we reflect on the why behind why we have to go through certain elements or scenarios or experiences or pains and suffering, think about it as the soil of the tree. Before the seed is crushed in the soil and being nurtured by the water within the soil, once it is wet, within some time, that seed is going to crack open. And the cracking open, if you were to perceive it from the seed point of view, you would quickly realize that I'm assuming that would be painful to some degree. But it is not to say that the seed is aware that it's actually growing, right? Because the seed only knows that it's going through the pain because the seed can only perceive its current perception of its experience. So let's say that the seed was to instead embrace the experience of its opening and of its birthing of what's within it as it cultivates itself through the nurturing of the elements and the minerals within the soil that you can say are the elements that occur throughout life. It is through some degree of discomfort and through the pains of suffering and assumptions, because we don't know what we don't know, and we can't necessarily see the bigger picture of the why behind why we have to go through all of these layers of pain and suffering, right? From the perspective of the seed, and it doesn't know that it's a seed, and it doesn't know that it's going to flourish into a tree and become this massive, beautiful blossom tree that bears fruits, so that it continues a cycle of its bearing onto a next generation of itself. Without knowing that, it's very easy for it to get stuck in the illusion of the suffering, when in reality it's just simply growing through the course of nature, the ebb and flow that happens throughout all living things, right? And of course, we have varieties and diversity as to how that process goes. But primarily at a fundamental level, it all kind of holds the same process, which is similar to our experience, having our own human experience as spiritual beings, learning to expand our conscious awareness through the exploration and the experience of life that allows us to embody more of the possibilities of what is possible if experiencing and living through the limitations of being human. So I digress before I get a little too over the top with my philosophies, but it is important that we learn to change and shift our perception to something a lot more brighter, so that we can introduce hope and gratitude into this process, which now brings us into the third one, which is cultivate gratitude. By cultivating gratitude as a daily practice, we integrate appreciation for positive aspects into our life, shifting our perception towards abundance and fulfillment. Because now when we start to realize that there's always a reason behind it, there's always a purpose behind it, and we release the mindset of playing the victim or living in the suffering and pain of life, the faster we realize that there's a reason behind it and there's lessons to be gained and wisdom to obtain, we learn to look for the bright side in things, the silver lining. We start to ask the right questions. Instead of, why me? You start asking, what is this teaching me? What am I gaining from this experience? What wisdom am I gaining? What strength am I gaining? What level of patience am I earning? Right? All of this comes from the challenges in life that actually build the character that is fully equipped to grow as a massive tree with a solid foundation that no matter what remains solid in its true essence of being, and not stagnant and underdeveloped underneath the soil. By going through the process with gratitude and appreciation and an open mindset to fully be able to accept this process, what we're doing is we are accepting the beautiful challenge, but really the beautiful growth of our essence within the experience of life. So now, what are practices for emotional releases? The first one is mindful release. Engage in mindfulness practice for emotional release. Allow yourself to feel and express emotions in a mindful way, facilitating the clearing for emotional pain. So, in order for us to actually release, to truly release, we first have to be mindful of what is it that we would need to facilitate that process for ourselves. Because we are aware that if I feel that a certain emotional state or pain is resurfacing in me. Maybe it was triggered by an experience or a memory. I am aware, as I am being mindful, that I need to allow myself the proper space and environment so that I can do so. And by doing this, I have to ask myself, how should I go about releasing this? Because we need to place the intention of the work we are about to do. I'm going to put this as an example, as one of my last releases that I just did a few months ago. Now, I was completely unaware. No, to some degree, I'm not going to say I was completely unaware. I wasn't completely unaware, but I honestly just kept suppressing, which is something that I used to do a lot. Growing up, that was one of my coping mechanisms. I believed that expressing my emotions to people that would not necessarily listen didn't really give me the outcome that I needed as a child, so I learned to cope with it by suppressing it or distracting myself or completely ignoring the fact that I was feeling anything. To some degree, numbing myself by just completely ignoring the sensations and the feelings that I was feeling. It's not to say that I wasn't feeling them. It's just I didn't emphasize on the attention or my focus upon them because I didn't think they were a priority or of importance. So I was not voicing what needed to be voiced for many years of my life. And because of this, the process of what I'm teaching you today was quite challenging for me for some time until I learned how much of a difference it made when I learned to fully embody these experiences, feel my emotional states so that I can really process and truly release them. And when I realized the difference of my sensations, of my body, of my feelings, of my mental, of my soul on a really deep level, I started to realize that I was suffocating myself with all these dense emotions that I didn't want to go ahead and give mind to. So, 4 years now, I've been doing the work, obviously. If I feel something, I'm going to express how I feel right then and there. More than likely, if I'm not in the environment or have the opportunity to do it there, I might take time to process and ask myself, what is it that I'm feeling? Why am I feeling this? Where did that come from? What is the origin of that feeling? Why is it that the meaning that I'm giving it? What belief do I have, or what expectation do I have that that's the meaning that I am deciding to give this emotion at this moment in time, right? These are the layering of introspection when we are processing emotions. Now, in the last few years, obviously, I've been doing this, but I had so many emotions still trapped within me from years and years ago that I was not aware was still within me. And on the last one, which was so intense and magical at the end because of how it led to something so amazing and so synchronized. It was almost as if because of me not being able to release this emotional pain within me before, I was not emotionally aligned to receive the message and the gift that I received right after. I mean, literally right after I did this, which validated how important this process is. So for me, I remember I was triggered by a situation that occurred that sparked a memory in me. This memory led to an individual in my life that is very, very important. One of the most important people in my life. We grew up together my whole entire life, right? So it resurfaced the memory of this individual, and I noticed that there's still a lot of unprocessed emotions that I had carried with this individual in particular, because they're so important, because I value them so much, that when it comes to them, I'm more sensitive to things because of how deep our connection is. And there was a lot of things that occurred throughout our life, and there was levels of guilt within me for not being able to do more, which I was not able to because I was a kid too. There was elements of me that wished things were different between our situation. There was elements of me that was so saddened by not having them with me, right? And I thought I was coping with the situation okay, until I came to the realization on that day that I wasn't, because the process of that trigger that brought that memory, that brought these emotions, that then resurfaced the pain, allowed me to have the opportunity to release. And I remember thinking, okay, I am about to release something. I feel like crying, which I haven't cried in so long, but I think I have to do this because I feel like I have to release so much. So I had to give myself the opportunity and the environment. And I'm pretty good with that. I'm not always around people. So I just stood in my room. And the first thing I did was pray. I prayed because for whatever reason, I knew that I needed the assistance of God within me to process this. And I prayed for the assistance of God. And I prayed that I would have the strength to do this, and I do it right and do it properly with forgiveness and love in my heart, right? So as I placed that intention with the assistance of God and by faith, I started writing a letter to this individual. And oh my God, it was as soon as I wrote that, as soon as I put the pen to the paper and I started letting go and writing and expressing all of these built up emotions and unsaid words and things I wanted to say, and it was just a bombshell of emotions just resurfaced, and I started crying. With each letter, it was like a new tear. It was like I was releasing as I was writing. And once I got to the end, close to the end of this letter, I started feeling my left leg shaking. It was as if, what it felt like was, I was suppressing these emotions for so long because I just neglected them. I just didn't feel that I had the opportunity or the space or the time or just the energy to really do this work. So I just it's like putting something in the closet and forgetting it's there. And all of a sudden, you open your closet and you just realize you've been piling up all these things in your closet, and now it's just jumping out at you. That's what it felt like. And the shaking of my leg was like literal energy. Felt like it was stuck in my body and primarily in my leg for whatever reason. And it was just shaking. And I remember seeing a video online of somatic exercises that actually helps you process emotions out of your body and energies that are clogged in you because we suppress them and we never allow them to be released and let go of. And that was the first thing, because had I not known that, I would have been nervous, right? But all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I'm intensely releasing these energies out of my physical body because they're jammed in my body. So because I was already aware with the information that I needed to process it calmly with clarity, I just simply allowed it. I allowed it to I allowed myself to cry. I allowed myself to express. I allowed myself to feel. And as I allowed myself to feel all of it, I learned to embrace these intensities of emotions. And when I learned to embrace it, the moment that was occurring, it was almost as a tragedy turning into a beautiful melody that allowed me to come into life again, allowed me to feel alive and what it is to be human, allowed me to feel what it is to love someone at such a profound level, to want to hold this space within you, in your heart, for them. And it's almost like a never-ending abundance of it, because it's a love like that never dies, right? And even though it's not a intimate partnership, it is still a brotherly, sisterly love, right? So it was just a beautiful unfoldment of a moment that brought into my awareness the beauty within what we share, which was beautiful. And I'm sharing this because it is, one, me being vulnerable and me learning to be okay with being vulnerable with my emotions, learning to be one with the beautiful expression of what that looks like, but also sharing it so that you can become aware of what it looks like to actually heal and release and let go of things that we give meaning to in the midst of being mad or upset or disappointed, or having expectations not be met, and all of these case scenarios that can occur, right? All of that is only distorting the truth behind what is really there, which is the connection, which is the love behind it all. And when we learn to appreciate and accept the truth of all of that, we learn to see the world a lot more clearly, with less pain, with less suffering, with less anxiety and depression, because we're just one with the moment. We are loving everything and accepting everything for what it is, and we are just learning to embrace the full spectrum of all of that it is. So for the next practice here, after sharing my story, a metaphor I like to use for what this is, if we were to look at it from this point of view, is to visualize the rust on unrefined metal, for example. Imagine your emotional pain as the rust on unrefined metal. Clearing emotional pain is akin to polishing that metal, removing the rust to reveal the innate beauty beneath it all. This practice preserves the authenticity of your being, allowing you to truly be one with your true essence and shine, right? Because when we think about metal, let's say we're looking at a gate that's probably been there for years. And this gate is obviously outdoors, but it's a metal gate. And when it was first put there, it was all nice and shiny, right? But then life happens. The elements of the weather happen. You have the rain, you have the wind, you have the dust, right, of the earth element. And all of the combination of what makes us us, in this physical body at least, it's playing a role in the orchestration and in the symphony of what life truly defines through the experience of life. And obviously through the courses and throughout the time of this, that metal is going to build up rust. And that rust does not take away from the metal beneath it. But when you look at that metal when it has rust, it's not looking as refined as it should. And if the metal was to be something that can perceive outside of itself, because of the rust that is on it, it won't have the full clarity on the full picture of its vision, right? Because the rust upon it is distorting it to some degree, right? So it can't see with clear sight or clarity what's really there. So this is what happens with all of us. Not one person can say otherwise, because this is what the process of life is to be born like the refined pure metal, go through the life challenges, the life joys, and the full spectrum of the diversity of the experiences that we'll be orchestrating throughout the courses of our life. And be aware that it is what builds character. It is what makes us grow. because through the experience is how we know what the elements are in the first place. The metal would not know what water is unless it is raining. That metal won't know what wind is unless it's felt. It won't know what dust is unless it's sitting on it. So this is in order for us to know who we are through the vastness of the infinite possibility that we experience within all of us in our interactions with each other, as we are all one, perceiving the illusion of separation. We won't know the beauty that is within another unless we are separated to see it, unless we are experiencing the illusion of that separation, right? The same way that even through my disagreements that created these emotional pains within me, that allow me to let go, forgive, and step back into the true meaning of life, to step back into the love and the connection. Because when we leave this physical reality, the only thing we really take is those moments that we step into these profound moments of appreciation, of love, of learning what it is to experience another. Not what they buy us, not what they said, but how they made us feel. So I just wanted to put that as a perspective so that we can shift our perception of how much more there is to life, right? Another practice for emotional release, which is something that I just mentioned, is the somatic exercises. Incorporate somatic exercises into your routine. Connect and release tension stored in the body through yoga, tai chi, or simple stretching exercises, promoting emotional well-being. So there's a whole bunch of information you can find on this online and videos on YouTube as well. And I can't remember the name, but there's someone that's really good doing this on Instagram as well. So I'm sure you can just look at somatic exercises and you can find, so that you can discover what works best for you and in your process as you incorporate more of these holistic practices into your daily life. And another practice would be expressive art therapy. So by exploring expressive art therapy as a creative outlet, by drawing or painting or engaging in any form of artistic expression, it provides us with a channel for processing and releasing emotional pain, which is also another thing I did when I was going through grieving a few years back. So there was a lot of things that I knew I did not want to do while grieving, because I saw the downside to wanting to numb and distract ourselves from processing these emotions. This is already when I was learning how to process my emotions. So I was already learning what is it that I should do and not do. And I already knew through the example and through the experiences of my past what I was not going to do, right? I was not going to distract myself going out all the time. I was not going to intoxicate myself, any of that. In fact, I stopped all of that so that I can be in the experience that at the moment of experience it felt like I was being broken. But in that breaking, like the seed that is flourishing and growing within the soil, I knew I had to embrace and process and release of these emotional pains within me. So when I went to do the practices for my own grieving, I went straight into writing music. I started writing music. I even went to the studio. I made a video. I started painting. I started writing. That's when I started writing my book. Many books actually prior to that, but I just started finding every outlet that was only going to expand me and not contract me. Because when we think about alcohol and drugs and distracting ourselves with people and things and going out and all these things, it's contracting you because you're staying stagnant and stuck, and you're not processing, and you're holding on to the pain because you're numbing yourself to it. You're distracting yourself. You're suppressing it. So I knew that was going to be the opposite of what I wanted to do. So I made sure not to do it at all. So I made sure to not do it at all. And if I did do it, when I did start doing it again, like going out and hanging out with friends and stuff, I did it with boundaries, restrictions, and standards. Like, I knew I didn't want to drink anymore, so I was not gonna drink. It was hard at first because I was so used to doing it, but I knew that was a decision that I made, and I had to be disciplined. And I don't really struggle with discipline, but I was also very used to it. So it was the first time that I felt challenged to stop something, which now I haven't drank for almost 3 years now, so it's okay. But in the beginning, it was challenging. So when I went about this expression, oh my God, it was just like opening another possibility of what can be done to heal, to process our emotions. Because I gained so much from these experiences. I gained so much wisdom. I gained so much creativity. I learned new ways of doing new things because I was open to trying new things. I was traveling to new places that I'd never been, and I was not scared to go alone and learn the culture and meet new people. And that expanded me, right? So it was so many ways of expressing my emotions, but in a more productive and holistic way that I'm so grateful for today. And for the final way of practices for emotional release is breath work and meditation. Embrace breath work and meditation practices to center yourself. These techniques create a space for emotional release and mental clarity, contributing to your overall well-being. So, of course, breath work is so important, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling anxiety and stress. Sometimes we just need to breathe. Taking a deep breath, holding it, and saying, I release. That's one thing I learned to do. Saying, I release as I exhaled helped me. I would inhale and tell myself, I am inhaling clarity, love, light, and healing within me. And I'm exhaling all the old, all the stagnant, all the pain, all the suffering, and all that no longer serves me. So it's like intention is so important. When you do any of these practices, make sure you place your intention so that your subconscious knows what is the intention, and it finds ways to do it in ways that are best for you. Because not everyone is going to be or need the same thing, right? So you need to know what works best for you. But once you place the intention of any of these practices, it allows you to become more familiar of what's authentically and generally natural and organic for you and your expression and your doings and your process of releasing your emotional pain and stagnant energies within. Now, how can you integrate this into your daily life? For one, we want to have a regular emotional check-in. If you have the app, you have your tracker there available. You also have your journal that's available to you that gives you the chart to track down your emotional states. As this incorporates a regular emotional check-in into your routine, assess your emotional state and address emerging challenges promptly, fostering a proactive approach to emotional well-being. And for the second one, we have holistic healing modalities. Explore holistic healing modalities like yoga and breath work. These practices contribute to a holistic approach to emotional cleansing and well-being. So, as the examples I gave above, these are some of the things that you can incorporate. Just being mindful of what works best for you and making sure you have a regular routine to check in on yourself. What is it that you're feeling? What do you feel that is resurfacing? If you feel like crying, make sure you give yourself the opportunity to cry it out. If you have to scream it, make sure you give yourself the opportunity to scream it. You could scream it into a pillow if you have to scream. If you have rage or anger in you or resentment and all these things, you can do that. If you have to cry it because it's more grief or sadness or longing, you can cry it out, because all of these are allowing you to release emotions as well. So crying is a cleansing, right? It's like the water element coming out of you with the emotions that are integrated within this water element, right? So as you allow yourself to cry it out and release it, it is something that makes you more open and vulnerable to the process of emotional release, right? Because if your body is resisting, it is going to be a lot more difficult. And if it's something that still triggers you, it's something that still needs to be worked on, right? Because if it was healed, if it was already processed, if it was already released, there would not be a trigger. There would not be a discomfort. There would not be a judgment. There wouldn't be anything, in fact. There will be no emotional charge. Because when there's no emotional charge within you, your body, your mind, and all of those modalities that make you uncomfortable, then that's when you know, as the confirmation, that okay, I've overcome this. I've released this. I've learned my lesson from this. I've healed from this, right? That's when you can actually say that, because there's no longer any emotional charge. Where someone, let's say, says something that might have hurt your feelings years ago because it was a sensitive topic, because it was connected to something that was painful for you, an experience that was painful, right? If someone was to say something that hurt your feelings, that remind you of that meaning that you gave that experience that you have still to let go of, you're going to feel an emotional trigger. You're going to feel offended. You're going to feel like someone's being mean to you and all that. And they can be mean, but you won't be in the emotional state to be triggered by it. It would just be an observation. But if you're still triggered, like I said, you still have to work on it. When you have the same experience occur and it's not affecting you in any which way, there's no emotional trigger, you realize you let go of it, you no longer feel any pain or any judgment or any even attraction towards a situation or a person. That means whatever that lesson was meant to bring you, whatever experience that person was supposed to bring you, has already been done. The lesson has been learned. The pain has been healed. And you can move on forward in your life with a much lighter load. So that's something that you can also be aware of. When you do the work and it no longer affects you or triggers you, and it's such a neutral and indifferent feeling, it's something you grew out of, it's something you learned from, it's something you released, which is a beautiful feeling once you get there, because it feels so light, it feels like rewarding, and then things start looking silly when you reflect back, because you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe that I was so attached to this story, or I was so attached to this person. Like, how would I even put myself there? How did I even happen? It's pretty funny sometimes. But here we are coming into our conclusion. As we conclude part 3 of clearing emotional pain, remember that the journey is an ongoing journey. Approach it with compassion and curiosity, diving into the depths of your inner world. May these practices guide you towards emotional cleansing, paving the way for a healthier and more fulfilling life. Now, for the question of our lesson, so that we can share in our community tab in our chat, What does cultivating compassion mean to you? And how has it transformed your approach to self and others? Now, of course, we want to go ahead and share our answers so that we can build the community that is necessary, so that we can have our support system intact and inspire those that maybe need guidance and can see the example of your process and be motivated in their own process. So I look forward to seeing everybody's answer there. And of course, like every other lesson, I like to bring in the disclaimer of the possible challenges that can occur through this process. Let's see here, with number 1 being overcoming judgment. One challenge may involve overcoming judgmental tendency, both towards oneself and others. It requires a shift from a critical mindset to one of understanding and empathy. For number 2, we have dealing with emotional fatigue. Constantly being open to understanding others' pain and challenges can sometimes lead to emotional fatigue. Finding a balance between compassion and self-care becomes crucial. Number 3, setting boundaries. Striking a balance between being compassionate and setting healthy boundaries can be challenging. It involves knowing when to offer support and when to step back for self-preservation. Number 4, facing resilience from others. Cultivating compassion might be met with resilience, skepticism, and misunderstanding from those who may not share the same mindset. This can be emotionally draining. Number 5, cultural and social influences. Cultural or social norms that emphasize competition over collaboration might pose challenges to fostering a compassionate mindset. Number 6, balancing empathy and detachment. Acknowledging the right balance between empathy and detachment is crucial. Being overly absorbed in others' struggles may lead to burnout, while detachment may hinder genuine connection. Number 7, addressing fear of vulnerability. Cultivating compassion often involves opening oneself up to vulnerability. Overcoming the fear of being vulnerable can be a significant hurdle for some individuals. Navigating these challenges is an integral part of the transformative journey towards cultivating compassion. Now, it is not to say that this is obviously guaranteed that it's going to happen, but it is a disclaimer of the possibilities of the challenges that might surface as we go through the courses of this journey. And in the following, we have here my information as well as our social information where you can find us, which we would appreciate if you can follow, share, and like our content.